Welcome to HickMania.
Welcome to my ultimate year.
HickMania is the reading club where we're going through the creator-owned works of Jonathan Hickman and
my ultimate year is the comic book reading club going through all of the Ultimate Universe.
And you know what? I'm excited today to be joined by my co-host.
Charlotte.
Charlotte Fierro. Charlotte, welcome to the show.
Charlotte, welcome back to my ultimate year. Very excited to have you on again. Charlotte, what podcast are you hosting today?
Is this a bad time to announce that I'm leaving to create my own Percy Jackson podcast?
Spotify got to her. Charlotte too early. No, it's too bad. All right,
yeah, yes, I'm going to be talking Percy Jackson on Joe Rogan.
All Percy Jackson all the time. So you may notice some confusion here in the opening of this episode. This is a crossover.
Year and my best comics ever.
This is a rare crossover. It's HickMania number 3. It's my ultimate year, the continuation of the read through the entire Marvel Ultimate Universe, because we're going to be talking about Jonathan Hickman's Ultimate Universe contributions, Ultimate Comics Hawkeye, and Ultimate Comics Ultimates. You two already covered Ultimate Comics Thor, which is a Thor book that he did in here, as well as Ultimate Comics Fallout, some short stories he had done, which I'm going to talk about a little bit today. But for me, for Dave, I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. HickMania is a series going through the entirety of 2022, where we'll be reading and analyzing the creator-owned works of writer Jonathan Hickman, from his debut, The Nightly News, through to his most recent output. Now, episode 3 was going to be, in chronological sequence, was going to be Transhuman, okay, which is his third creator-owned output. It's actually the first book he had done, where that was published at least, with an artist other than himself. It's the first time he's not drawing his own work. He's working with J.M. Ringwet. Here's the thing about reading Transhuman, which I had never done before this project. It is, by far, his worst work. By several miles. It is a mockumentary, okay, so labeled by the writer himself, about genetic engineering, about the business practices of that, and it is like it tries to play appropriately enough for the Ultimate Universe conversation we're going to have in the Mark Miller space at times of sort of gross out, crass teenage humor, and it just falls on its face over and over and over again. Listen, it is an interesting failure, but because my ultimate year, this podcast that Zack and I started going through the full Ultimate Universe, a spinoff of my Marvelous
year.
You were
on this show? I don't even remember that.
Wow. What have you done for me lately?
I thought Charlotte had always been the co-host of the show.
Yes,
it feels
I went
that
back
way.
in time to join the My Ultimate Year podcast from the jump.
Wow, you doomed time platformed me.
She just went back and re-recorded every line, and I have re-edited it back. I don't know if you've listened to the old episodes sometimes.
So now it's my ultimate year number 1, Charlotte's version in parentheses.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
The Charlotte cut. Uh-huh.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I have memories of being on the show, whether it's true or not. And now the Ultimate Universe read-through is approaching the Hickman Ultimate stuff anyway. I saw this as the perfect opportunity to avoid the long conversation about why Transhuman is a mess.
Oh, so you're not even reading it?
No, I read it.
But you're not going to talk about it.
I'm not going to cover it in a particular episode because, here's the thing. So we covered Nightly News. We covered Pax Romana. Both of those are really interesting, and there's good stuff. But we're also pretty critical of them, right? We're having a full conversation about what works, what doesn't. And I do not want to do a full sequel hour of just negativity. I just don't want to put that on the feed. Instead, I'd rather talk about something that I mostly really like, which is this Ultimate Comics Hawkeye and Ultimates. So thank you to Zack and Charlotte for allowing me to cross this thing over. To hijack my ultimate year. Zack, what is my ultimate year? I mean, I've described it, but what have you been doing?
Some of your best comics ever listeners might not know. Yeah, it's the spinoff of My Marvelous Year we started about 3 years ago. 2.5. And it's covering every comic in the Ultimate Universe of Marvel Comics. We're probably 75-80% of the way through. This is the 7th to last episode.
Yeah,
we wrap the whole thing up. This is pretty close to the end. And so come join. It starts out with Dave for an episode or two, and then Charlotte takes over Eventually,
And-
and the show really levels up. Yeah.
And right. And I'm really excited about when this is coming out. So like this Ultimates coverage for HickMania is going to come out in March. It's going to be our March 2022 episode. The My Ultimate Year episode that releases in March is my guest star appearance covering Ultimatum with both of you. So if you're curious to hear what My Ultimate Year is all about, you can hear all three of us talk Ultimatum, which is obviously an interesting time. And I'm just going to venture to guess will come up in conversation about Ultimates and Hawkeye here. As a basic, like I guess here's the thing, like as you've been covering the post-Ultimatum landscape, have you had a single conversation where you don't have to reference Ultimatum?
Miles, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, the Spider-Man has veered kind of away from that for the most part. Like the death of Peter Parker and moving into the Miles Morales era. That doesn't feel too strongly influenced by like what happened in Ultimatum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the Ultimate Universe has been in a weird place between Ultimatum and these comics that we're going to be talking about, which is a weird short period of time between relaunches, which feels like they did a first relaunch that didn't really work, and now they're doing it again with Bendis and Spencer and Hickman on Ultimates.
Right. Yeah, you're going to see Hickman like almost hand wave away some of the relaunch stuff that we just got.
Really? Okay.
For the better, yeah, I think. But like, just kind of interesting. Before we jump into that, Dave, since I am on HickMania technically, just gotta say, it doesn't even sound like you and your guests have been like real Hickman fans. Because I read Pax Romania and the Nightly News, and like, those are very good comics. I wish I was on both those episodes so I could bully you nerds for not liking those comics enough. Both those comics are very. I really like those. They might be my favorite Hickman stuff.
You know, Pax Romana.
I haven't read that much besides like Manhattan Projects. So
I definitely have Hickman stuff I like more. Pax Romana, I do think like it comes off maybe as more critical than I think the intent was, which was to have. No, it's just like, you know, we were having a conversation about what works and what doesn't. Pax Romana is pretty good. Like I have it inside the top 300 of my favorite comics of all time, you know, on the best comics of all time list on CBH, right? Like, so it's not, I'm not anti-Pax Romana in any capacity. I do think the Nightly News definitely reads very differently now. Like I'm not as taken by but again, I think we're fair, Zach. I think we're fair.
Totally
and I think the people need to hear what a real critic thinks of these books.
One of the guests, I can't remember if it was Chris or Rob, but one of them said that Pax Romana read kind of like a intro guidebook to an RPG. And I think that's exactly why I like Pax Romana.
You know what? It's funny reading Pax. Sorry, we won't talk about this much, but like Pax Romana compared to reading Hickman's Three Worlds project on Substack. I'm like seeing a lot of the same thing because it's like he has characters in the book talking about world building and like in ways that are like exactly paralleling what he like. This was a beginning place for him to work out ideas that he was going to work out on his Substack project later.
Well, and speaking,
exactly.
We're going to work out ideas.
Marvel
Ultimates, you know, in the Marvel Universe side, absolutely. Like it's a perfect segue because this is definitely a creator who is like very interested in refining and critiquing their work. You know, you mentioned the Three Worlds, Three Moons. I just listened to a conversation, a live stream he had with their new editor-in-chief, Stephen Wacker. And in that conversation, he was basically saying, like, the secret to being a great comics writer is you dissect and you critique your work harder than anyone, so that when people bring feedback to you, essentially, when they bring critiques to you, you've already thought about it. You've already done the homework, essentially, which doesn't mean you can't have other ideas that you bounce off or whatever. But like, this is clearly a creator who does that, but also he's building things here in Ultimates that he's going to use in Avengers, that he's going to use in X-Men, that he's going to use in creator-owned works like East of West and Black Monday Murders. Like the experience, the build is very, very clear, I think, when you're familiar with the catalog. And I do just to your earlier point, I'm a big fan of the work. I came into I'm especially a big fan of the Marvel work. And that's part of the rationale for the project here is, okay, I have Jonathan Hickman's Marvel Universe as my fourth favorite comics of all time. Okay. But I haven't necessarily read all of his creator-owned stuff, and I haven't had long, deep conversations about, and honestly, I think a lot of times there's not like clear, good criticism or exploration of his longer run. So I wasn't going to do the Marvel stuff because the Marvel stuff gets all the attention. It's obvious. Like yes, go read Secret Warriors, go read Fantastic Four. But Ultimates was too good an opportunity. Plus, because it's outside 616, listen, it's not a creator-owned work, but it has more of that energy. It has more of that energy of like, I can do whatever I want with these toys. And I think we'll talk about the appeal of that, because that's definitely like, that's why I think these first 9 issues, I'm going to say, are so exciting in terms of being like, okay, we've got a visionary or a creative auteur here in Hickman and Esad Ribic on Ultimate Comics Ultimates, who are like, listen, this Ultimate Universe has been blown up. It has been destroyed. It has been sometimes cannibalized and eaten. It is in position to be reformed and remade in a new image. How do we do that? Playing with all the Marvel Universe concepts and toys. And I think that's where Ultimates is most interesting. All right, let me throw it to Charlotte. Charlotte, you've been reading the full Ultimate Journey. Coming into these comics fresh, again, like we're going to talk about Ultimate Comics Hawkeye as well, because it's a piece of this. It's a tie-in, but it's connected to Ultimates. Out of that context, into this new era of Hickman on Ultimates, Bendis on Miles Spider-Man, Spencer on Ultimate X-Men. How did these hit for you? How did it work? Did it have you excited about the Ultimate Universe again? Kind of what's that experience been?
Yeah, I think it exactly like you said. It helps a lot getting really excited about the Ultimate Universe. I think it's a great start for a relaunch of the universe, because by the end it's a completely different universe. Like he makes up countries, he destroys entire countries. Like the Ultimate Universe is changed in a way that couldn't happen in the main 616 universe, which is very fun to see. And also, like, I think half of my enjoyment was reading it as part of the Marvel Universe, as part of the Ultimate Universe, and half of it was reading it as almost a thematical prequel to the Krakoa era and some of his late Marvel stuff. There are some scenes that can be compared almost page by page to stuff that happens in Huxbox, for example. So that was very interesting to see.
Yeah, the X-Men parallels are more than I think I anticipated. It was something I didn't really realize until reading his X-Men run, when you get to issues 18 and 19 in the vault. And actually, I haven't said it yet, but spoiler alert, we are going to talk about Ultimate Comics Hawkeye and Ultimates in full. Okay, we're going to talk about these full stories as people have read them. If you don't want anything spoiled, definitely go read them and come back. Okay, but yes, there is so much X-Men stuff here. I actually started making a list. Let's see if I can find it, of just all the X-Men stuff. But like definitely with the Vault and the People of Tomorrow, there's a ton of stuff that is overlapping. But even just conceptually, I think one of the most impressive things about Hickman taking over Ultimates is clearly this is ripe for a reinvention of a Marvel Universe, that, kind of stuff we haven't seen before. And I do appreciate too, like, so Ultimates as a brand at this point means something, like the Miller and Hitch stuff means a lot to creators a decade later. Like Hickman talks very glowingly about that original work by Miller and Hitch. He says like it's like perfect superhero comics kind of stuff. And I'm paraphrasing, that might not be exactly what it is, but there's very positive sentiment. And I think Hickman gets that, and and with Ribic especially, because it's like you have to have the artistic component to sell the sci-fi and sell the futuristic aspects of this world, essentially. But he dives really headfirst into like, okay, what can we do in Ultimates that is different than 616, and how do we sell that? And one of the big things is like it allows for these geopolitical exploration taken to extremes, right? So like in Miller Hitch Ultimates, you have this post 9/11 reaction to modern mass casualty, external terrorism. And then in Ultimates 2, you do actually get more with like American exceptionalism and America is the world's police and all this post-Iraq stuff, or the stuff that was going on, not post-Iraq, this middle of Iraq war stuff that was going on in America, right? This global scale of a world where S.H.I.E.L.D. and this universe's Avengers are very purposefully military police. Like that is what the Ultimates are. I mean, you see a lot of this like very cold takes now, frankly, on social media about like, oh, the Avengers are cops. But really, that's an Ultimate Universe interpretation. Like the Ultimate Universe Ultimates, they are police. Like they are S.H.I.E.L.D.'s, they are S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, all of them. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, this, and Hulk, even to a degree, right? This is what they, Black Widow, like this is what they are. And Hickman gets that and he utilizes that, but then he sort of subverts it and he plays it in interesting ways. And I think he really dives headfirst into, I think, kind of the best thing that Miller and Hitch walked up to in Ultimates 2, actually, in terms of a willingness to actually sort of like, if not criticize, at least explore American politics, throwing the weight of the military at every provocation. I don't necessarily expect us to get a ton of mileage out of like the politics of Ultimates, because it's not what the story's doing. But it's actually like deeply underdiscussed that this is the book that vilified and then blew up a sitting president. He's never named, but that's clearly 2012 Barack Obama.
Well, right? Listen, yeah, maybe. I mean, Mark Miller did, I think, blow up Barbara Bush, maybe, or Laura Bush. I can't remember. Okay. He definitely killed the first lady as a gag, even. Which
I think George W. Bush was naked in front of the White House.
Yeah, that was a little more. He's definitely naked on the lawn in front of Magneto at one point, but I don't think he actually gets blown up with like the entirety of Congress.
The politics aspect of this is interesting to me because Hickman is. He seems like he's someone who's really interested in discussing structures of power and that, like, big political movements without ever really focusing on details, right? Like, which is fine because he's a very detailed driven guy, but like he is not trying, like he very rarely sounds like he's being like, this political movement of the past 2 years is what I'm focusing on, right? Like I'm talking about Trump here. I'm talking about George W. Bush and the invasion of Iraq. Like he definitely likes to talk about huge societal shifts in power rather than like hone in on the personal. So like, but that does mean that sometimes he uses real world stuff, and it kind of feels like he just kind of wants to use the like the meme of it almost. Like, I don't mean as a joke meme, but like memetically, he is using China/North Korea, just our kind of vague idea of Red Scare Asian powers that are now, like brutal to their people and using their people for human experimentation and creating this new strain of super people. But like, I don't think he really cares about North Korea. I don't think that's his point here, right? Like that is not what he's getting behind necessarily. I was actually surprised later when China was named by name, because I was just like, oh, you're just talking about China, but not saying China. But I guess not.
And here it's the Southeast Asian Republic, right? It's the sphere, which is like, it's real in the sense that like you can point to it on a map, but it's kind of Latveria in the sense that it's not, right? Yes.
Which I was surprised he didn't just use Madripoor, honestly. Just tweak.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because it's not a real country, but he still uses real places. Like most of it happens in Bangkok, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's kind of like it's kind of like what he does with alternate histories, and he kind of does that here with alternate countries, the Marvel universe that doesn't reflect actually how the real world is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, just as an aside, this does start out in northern Germany, with the maker creating a city in northern Germany. And we did have a German listener in the Slack pop in, Johannes, and say, that looks like the desert. Northern Germany is like heavily forested. It looks nothing like Arizona, which is what the art is like. Yeah. It's just a weird little mix mash of detail that I'm surprised.
Well, maybe that was post maker setting down and it destroyed all the forestry.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. Okay, never mind. We'll Johannes, apologize. To Hickman,
yes, please apologize to Isadorovich. No, I think you're both spot on. And Zach, I think you made a great point there, which is like Hickman, and I think this is true of his work across the board generally, he's regularly playing with the idea of politics and the societal influence of these things. And I think the specifics of, oh, that looks like Barack Obama, is less a reflection of like, what was US policy circa 2011, 2012, and more of just like, well, that's what we do in the Ultimate Universe. We use the real president, and sort of reflection. And then I think there's some commentary around like, as Ultimate progresses, you have this like America versus S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of situation, but really all of it is kind of just building to this idea of like, the Ultimates is a superhero universe, and how do we make America sort of like superhero driven, or should it be? essentially. And that's kind of like a thing that the Ultimate Universe will continue to go on to play with. So, all right, let's back that up and let's talk about, kind of what we're talking about there with the Maker. And in Ultimate Comics Ultimate's kind of how this series starts. So the first thing I'll say here is the Hickman written pieces of Ultimate Fallout that come before this, issues 3 through 6, actually do add a healthy amount of context for what's happening in the first like 2 or 3 issues, particularly with the Maker and Tony's rich friends. I don't think we're spoiling anything by saying who the Maker is, but again, if you don't know, go and read these.
This is actually a question I had for Charlotte, because my memory is awful when it comes to this stuff, but it's revealed, and again, spoilers, it's revealed about, I don't know, a few issues into this that the Maker is Reed Richards. I thought we just knew that already, right, Charlotte?
Yeah, we knew that from Ultimate Fallout.
Yes.
Yeah, it's already, I was like, that was done as like a issue end reveal, and I was like, but we knew that. I mean, the reveal is his head's all wonky now, but like it's less of a twist.
He's got a fun monk, Friar Tuck monk haircut around a really big long head. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of reinforces what we were saying about Ultimate Fallout in the episode, which is it was basically just an ad for what they were about to launch, and so you still have to do it in the actual comic.
Ad.
Yeah.
Because I read these definitely the first time without having read Ultimate Fallout. And it does. The Reed stuff is like you can read this without knowing that, and I guess maybe that's the intent of keeping it secret. It is like, well, maybe everybody didn't read Ultimate Fallout, so we'll kind of play that up for who could this be, even though it feels obvious now. The stuff with Tony and his rich friends is like weirdly critical because that they just throw you in the deep end, and then that's one of the many plot lines here that just gets totally dropped as the Ultimate spirals towards its greatest failure, which is that it gets cut off way too short, or the Hickman version of it does, right? So anyway, going off of that, the way this book starts is with the Maker, aka Reed Richards, post Ultimate Fallout, post Bendis written Ultimate Enemy trilogy, which basically made Reed Richards the evil version of Reed Richards, right? He becomes the Doctor Doom. He becomes the scorned genius, essentially. That's the Ultimate Universe version of Reed. And he returns here after being left for dead in the negative zone with semi-plot for revenge, but mostly just like he's creating a perfect society. And this is something that Hickman explores a lot in his work, exploring evolution, advancement of theoretical perfect societies, genetic engineering. We've seen all these themes developed in his creator-owned stuff, right? Pax Romana, Transhuman, we'll see it a bit in A Red Mask from Mars. And what he does here is he takes mostly Morrisonian concepts from New X-Men, the world. He takes Mike Carey, X-Men. He takes Children of the Vault, and he makes the Maker as the head of all this, making the Children of Tomorrow, which if you're familiar with X-Men now, if you're familiar with the Mike Carey X-Men run, the Children of Tomorrow are just replace Tomorrow with Vault, and it's the Children of the Vault. Like it is truly that in the Morrisonian concept of the world, which is this really cool concept that Hickman clearly is enamored with, which is like, what if we could speed up evolution? What if we could speed up creating a perfect society?
Pax Romana does, right? Like,
Pax Romana as well. And it's like, we're going to make a perfect society, and 1,000 years will have passed here and only a few seconds or a few minutes in the real world, or whatever the math is, right? Zack, what was your reaction to, because this is new for you in terms of the Maker and his plan. How did you like that? How did you like that development after what you've seen of Reed Richards in the Ultimate Universe? How did that stuff hit for you?
It's good, and it's not. I'm not going to give Ellis or Carey that much credit for like really building this. Like Reed Richards has always been.
Grant Morrison. It's a Grant Morrison idea.
No, I mean like the long buildup of Ultimate
of Reed.
4 was
Gotcha.
like Ellis and Carey were like on it for a really long time, and like Reed Richards is always a jerk, right? But it's I don't think they had that in mind. I think they ran out of ideas, and we're not selling Fantastic Four comics, and we're like, all right, what can we do with this? Like we're canceling the series. What can we do interesting with this? We can make Reed Richards a villain. It kind of seems like a natural progression. But like the is it Ultimate Enemy? That's what you said was the one where we first got revealed. That it's not that exciting to me the way it was done. Like it's a cool idea, but it doesn't hit like this, which is where you're genuinely seeing, oh, Reed Richards is very formidable. He's a very formidable brain to be reckoned with, and he's got an idea that's going to be, of course, devastating to the world and a serious threat. And yeah, I think it's very exciting. I think it still sticks with the Reed Richards character, right? Like his ego about being the smartest is still on full display here.
Mm-hmm.
But also that he's not purely just like a Machiavellian. I mean, he's very Machiavellian, but he's not in it for, psychopathic reasons of, he just doesn't want to cause mass destruction and kill mindlessly, right? Like he wants to create a better society. And, if he has to break a few eggs along the way, like, so be it. But he still is, for what he thinks is a greater good, for the greater good of society. And then, interestingly, we'll get into it that like his human fallibility and his weaknesses are what are the him in contrast to the city that he created, which I think is a very interesting point.
Yeah. And Charlotte, before we throw it to you, I want to mention here that we've been talking on HickMania about Hickman as coming into his own as a creator, right? Nightly News, Pax Romana, he's beginning his comics career with these are literally the first comics he's putting out. By the time we get to Ultimates, this is a jump, right? We're starting in 2011. He's fairly fully formed, not literally like at his peak, but he's written the entirety of Secret Warriors, just ended. He's deep into his Fantastic Four run. And in the Fantastic Four run in particular, this is a writer who knows Reed Richards, right? Like that is a Reed Richards centric run to the point that there are multiversal Reed Richards, right? So he's written alternate takes on Reed. Charlotte, as someone who is probably a little more familiar with the Marvel universe of Hickman, and particularly his Fantastic Four, what do you think it is about the maker that works and stands out? Because it's not like he hasn't written quote unquote evil Reeds before, but this one does seem to have some gravitas, I think.
To be honest, I haven't read his actual Fantastic Four. I've mostly read his Avengers, like Avengers and Forward, because that's one of the first Marvel comics I read.
Yeah,
it's very interesting to see him write Reed as his like a mix of Reed and Doom, and kind of in the line of what he'll do with Doom in. I'm guessing in his Fantastic Four, but also in his Avengers and Secret Wars. It's very interesting to have that. Reed is the incarnation of what he does in Pax Romana and in a lot of his books, with the idea of the great man who wants to change the world and bring on his ideal society, and here like the opposition between like there's three sides. There's Reed, there's the US, and there's Xorn and Zorn with the people. Mm-hmm. And that's it's very interesting to have. Basically, he plays in his own sandbox with characters that half of them he didn't create, the Miller or Bendis creations, and he does his own stuff with them, but in the line of what was done before. And then he completely invents a new corner of the universe that becomes hugely important here with Xorn and Zorn. And that's the opposition between the two are very interesting, and he makes the Children of the Vault or the Children of Tomorrow work, even though they're very inspired by stuff that happens before, because of the context of how it's happening in Ultimates. It's under a whole new light. That's very interesting.
Yeah. No, and the Children of Tomorrow are the children of the maker, right? These are the beings that he is manufacturing within the world, his perfect society. They are all built, right? They are manufactured, and they are all built to have a purpose. It's like an ant colony, but for genetically engineered human beings. And they are also like the reason these are such. So you have the maker lives inside the city, and they have this artificial intelligence manufacturing the people, or the Children of Tomorrow. These are great concepts and great antagonists because they effectively capture like, okay, in this world and there's a quote here about Tony Stark being like an alcoholic weapon of mass destruction, right? This is the world. Powered beings, that brings evolution, right? That brings evolved threats. And for the longest time, arguably like the entire run until the very end, the city, the maker, the Children of Tomorrow, they're an enemy that S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Ultimates cannot defeat. Like they cannot punch their way out of this one. They cannot even nuke their way out of this one. Nukes are used repeatedly, and it's like
literally every nuke.
Every nuke in the world is used. And there's a quote here from the maker, which I think captures what Hickman's getting at with this, which is, how else will mankind find the grace to manage its own extinction spiral? That's a cool concept. That's a nice big idea of like mankind is outdated. Mankind is at the end of its rope, including the Ultimates, including Shield. We're the next wave. We're what comes next. Speaking of what comes next, we also have in Ultimate Comics Hawkeye, which you're talking about here, Charlotte, the people and Zorn and this new society. Let's go to that, because for the longest time, I definitely thought like Ultimate Comics Hawkeye, I don't know, I just had this memory of it being like kind of inessential, doing more Hawkeye origin stuff, kind of like he does with Thor, which is fine if you're super invested in the Ultimate Universe, but not necessarily what I'm here for. It's actually not really what it is. There's actually huge ideas, and it's pretty critical to understanding and enjoying Ultimates. Zach, what did you make of really like the sci-fi and the political intrigue of Seer here with their plot and then the ramifications of developing the people of tomorrow? I keep getting the children.
No, they're just the people.
Just the people.
Yeah,
I get those so mixed up in my head every time. Just the people. What do you think of all that?
It's a fun idea. Once you kind of separate it from the, like, again, him just using vague, North Korean scaremongering a little bit. If you can kind of get past that part, I think it's a very interesting idea. The superpower that wants to, and this is something that we don't explore, use a virus to wipe out all mutants or to halt the creation of new mutants worldwide. They're like, we're going to have this, this virus will be spread throughout the world within 5 days, like total coverage over the human population, and it will completely eradicate the presence of the like mutant gene I'm assuming popping up again, because there's still mutants around, but it just means like no more mutants. And was this post or pre House of M?
Oh, it's post. Like this is
okay.
So this is doing Wanda's decimation, but with
it's making jokes. Okay, because they say no more mutants a few times.
Yeah. I don't know if it's even a joke so much as just a nod and a wink. And the ultimate, the thing the Ultimates can do, which is we're going to take a Marvel idea and we're going to spin it, right, and see if it works.
So with the creation of these superhumans who then rebel against their creators, which is, I guess, a parallel we see again with the city later. You get the creation of Tian, or Heaven, and the two factions, Eternals and the Celestials. And this is fun because I don't really, I'm sorry, Jack Kirby, but I don't really need his version of the Eternals or Celestials in the Ultimate Universe. I was not like excited to see them, but him just using this language here was kind of fun, especially when then these groups label everyone else deviants. It's the fun way of dealing with deviants, which is kind of a problematic idea, period, right? Having like, it's the slave race of genetically lesser people living under our houses.
You're thinking of alpha primitives. The deviants have thriving societies.
Totally. I am thinking of alpha primitives. You're right. But yeah, this stuff is the only stuff that doesn't feel fully developed. Like by the end, it feels like we never get full closure on like who the people are. That is like the big issue with this whole run for me.
I think I would agree. So I think closure is a problem with this whole project. Like we're kind of beating around the bush here, but like the worst thing about Ultimates, pretty unquestionably for me, is it fast tracks the ending. And it kind of has to, right? And when you hit a point, it's either issue 9 or issue 10. And it's like this, where Sam Humphries joins as co-writer with Hickman. And the second that happens, it's just like we're in transition mode. We're out of the Hickman era into the Humphries. And honestly, this isn't even about like Humphries' capabilities as a writer in any capacity. That's not even what I'm talking about. It's just that we effectively only have like 9 issues of Hickman and Ribich's auteur creator vision for Ultimates plus Hawkeye, right? Which isn't Esad Ribich. We should give credit there. On Hawkeye, we got art by Rafa Sandoval, inks by Jordi Tarragona, colors by Brad Anderson, letters by Clayton Cowles on both of these. But it's just like the second we hit that stage, it's like, oh, okay, we're transitioning out of this. And you feel it, I think, in those issues. They're handing over the keys, and Hickman has repeatedly said he was really disappointed by this. Like he was disappointed with his Ultimates run ending, and that he would have liked to have been on the book for much longer. I've got a quote here, actually. This is circa Secret Wars, so it's like 5 years later. I think that Ultimate stuff that Esad and I did is one of the best things I've done at Marvel. It was unquestionably a failure, but it wasn't that the book wasn't good. It was because it was the same time the New 52 came out. It got completely crushed under a wave of product. That was a bummer. I wanted to build the Ultimate Universe. I wanted to do it in a way where you couldn't in 616. I'm paraphrasing here. He was saying, you weren't constrained by continuity. I desperately wanted that book to succeed. I would have done that book for years. Like, it's one of the great what ifs of the Hickman Marvelverse is like, I always have this idea that I'm constantly pushing, which is like, I would love it if Marvel launched a Marvel Universe #1. And it was out of continuity. It was just a totally separate thing where you gave basically like auteurs, you gave creators that you really trust the ability to say, hey, here's our oversized, maybe 9 issues a year Marvel Universe, book. You could do it in a season, and you just give like one creative team or creative teams the opportunity to just do the whole thing, right? Hickman had that. Yeah. He had that with Ultimates. The only thing he doesn't have is Bendis doing Miles and the Spider-Man verse, and then technically Spencer on X-Men. But he's playing with X-Men stuff in Hawkeye anyway, right? Mm-hmm. You have Shield reference. Like Hickman has the Marvel Universe book. And he says here, it just got crushed under New 52 sales. Therefore, he had to go off. Now, this actually conflates a little bit with some other quotes. So like at the time, he told CBR, I got a job offer that I couldn't refuse, so I'm taking it. That was obviously taking over Avengers and New Avengers with the launch of Marvel Now in 2012. So like there's some editorial Marvel corporate business response to DC's launch of the New 52, where it's like, hey, to compete, we have to do a Marvel Now. We have to do a wave of #1s of our own. I actually looked, I was curious, like, was Ultimate Comics Ultimate sales that bad? I went and looked, and like, if you compare it to the previous year, to like, I think it was Avengers 3 or Ultimate Comics Avengers 3 or whatever the previous one that Miller did. Yeah. The sales on that launched the previous year, they aren't that far apart. We're talking like 6,000 to 8,000 units comparing #1 and #2 issues. The difference is Ultimate Comics Avengers is like inside the top 20 of comics. But once the New 52 launches, Ultimates is like out of the top 50 when it launches. Yeah,
crazy.
Basically, so it's just like the volume of product, like the numbers, it's like the units moving aren't that different, but the actual like ranking is bad comparatively. And then the other piece of that I find interesting is like Hickman's like, okay, I got crushed. The sales weren't good. I had to get off. But then Sam Humphries comes on the book and it goes for another 20 plus issues.
Yeah.
Like the book actually doesn't get canceled.
It is I have not read past the first year of his era on X-Men. Mm-hmm. But isn't this this is something I was seeing a lot of discussion about, which is with the X-Men stuff, which is like, oh yeah, he set up all this stuff in Hoxpox in the beginning of the X-Men era. And like, are we ever going to see it? And I don't know, maybe not anymore. Well, right. So like that does seem to be a reoccurring problem. Although I wanted to ask, does Secret Wars pull the landing? Does Secret Wars do it? Does it complete and have closure?
So that's the other piece of this, which is Ultimates can be viewed as a piece of the Hickman verse, which can be read as one giant story. Yeah. So if you go from Secret Warriors, Fantastic Four, Ultimates into Avengers up to Secret Wars, Ultimates does ultimately become a piece of that. Yeah. So yes, I mean, I think Secret Wars is the best comic book event of all time. I think in any context, if you're asking, does it stick the landing? I think the answer is yes for any series Hickman has written.
So he doesn't leave 70% of the way through because of some editorial.
No. He sticks that out through Secret Wars, and it's great. But I will say with Ultimate, like the resolution of a lot of the ideas of Ultimates, it's not like Secret Wars goes back and revisits that. Like there's a lot of fruit left on the tree. Whether it's things like you're saying, Zach, which are the people feel like they could be fleshed out more, which maybe the Humphries run will go on to do, right? But there's also just like, there's these ideas and things that get seeded here, like Tony Stark and the Wealthy Elites. That just gets untouched after like issue 3. Thor and Valhalla, Thor's son. These things go untouched. Captain America roaming on his own. Like I said, even the Zorns and Seer, what happens to them? All that is left on the table for Humphries, but it is incredibly reminiscent of where we are with X-Men right now, which was the launch of House of X and Powers of 10, an X-Men run, and then Hickman saying, okay, the plans don't quite line up. I'm out. Here are all the ideas. And he literally has the quote here in an interview with Humphries where he's like, I told Sam all my plans. He can do whatever he wants. That's where X-Men is too.
Interesting.
And it's like, I told the writers all the plans. They can do what they want. That gives some people confidence. When I look historically back at like, he's like, I told Sam all the plans. Like that still doesn't mean they're coming from the same mind. That still doesn't mean they're coming with the same vision. it doesn't mean they're going to land, you know? So it's a dicey proposition. But yeah, Zach, you're spot on. I mean, that's one of the tweets we got here from @Cathaldon1. It's a shame that both this and his X-Men seem like they had the potential to be his greatest works, and neither reached their planned conclusion. His exit was understandable, but with Hickman's own disappointment in his Avengers run, it's hard not to what if Ultimates. Charlotte, let's throw it to you. Do you, having read this, do you feel like there's a huge what if? Do you feel like this could have been one of the greats, or do you actually feel like maybe that's overstated?
I mean, I think one of the things that's very frustrating about him not yet having finished his X-Men is that some of the ideas he couldn't finish here, he kind of transferred over to X-Men, and he still didn't finish them there, like the stuff with the Children of the Tomorrow / Children of the Vault, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's weird that he played twice in not in the same sandbox, but with the same big ideas, and neither times we got to see the end of that. Maybe one day he'll come back to X-Men and do that second to third act. I think it's weird, but also I don't know if we would have gotten a Huxbox and his X-Men if he had gotten to finish his Ultimates, or it would have been a very different X-Men. That's an interesting what if.
It seems like without. Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
No, go ahead.
Without Secret Wars having completed so well, and I want to say I have not read anything to do with Secret Wars, and my anticipation for that could not be higher. Like, it is a constant daily struggle to not want to jump way ahead in my Marvelous Years Club and just start reading all of that because I'm incredibly excited. But his Marvel work does, I guess that is the big exception because that works. But if it was just this and X-Men, which is the stuff I've read, I would be like, yeah, this guy should get away from superhero comics because he never apparently can't like pull the landing on what he wants to do. Like, he should just stick to his creator-own stuff and stick to these, small series that he can. I just wonder in general, like, I guess you're saying Secret Wars works, but like his big long series, I wonder if, big ideas and early execution is great, and then like actually providing closure is something he has a problem with, because I remember that.
Well, I think that's overstated. I do think that's an interesting conversation because of the way X-Men fizzled out.
Well, you're going to have a whole year of talking about this with like, do his series end as strongly as they begin? So I think the few I've read, I'd say no. Nightly News and Pax Romana and Manhattan Projects all, I wouldn't say fizzle.
East of West is definitely the biggest counter because it does go for a firm 45.
Yeah, I haven't read the whole
and have a conclusion that I think is it as good as the beginning? No, but most comics aren't.
Yeah,
but I think it's effective. Okay. I think it's of a piece.
That'll be interesting to see.
I think when he actually goes for an ending, it works. But some of the examples here, like Pax Romana, that's not actually an ending. That's the end of an introduction, but it's not an actual ending. I don't know if the same is true for the Nightly News. I don't know if he planned on continuing that, but I know Manhattan Projects, like that might have had a continuation at some point.
And so, that I think just drifts away, right? Manhattan Projects, and you'll get to that. Great, like I love that comic. So like this is not shade against, excited to reread that again, but that does just kind of fizzle.
He's also not especially unusual in that regard. There's a lot of those Image Boom books that came out circa 2012, 2013 or whatever. They do kind of just fizzle, right? Like, or they're like still going. Like there's like insane, like delayed payoff for like Deadly Class is still going somehow. What happened to Bitch Planet? Did that ever have resolution? Like Lazarus with Greg Rucka has had sporadic books. Like a lot of these books that were big in that launch period kind of just go and fizzle and then maybe end. Like Sex Criminals finally did have an ending. Saga just came back to keep going. It's a mixed bag. I'm just saying, like, he's definitely not alone in that wave of creators who had stuff in terms of like, don't they resolve? I mean, I would say with his stuff, it's like, it's probably like a 70-30 split. Like 70% of these things do have endings that are, varying degrees of effective, but the 30% really stands out because it's X-Men or it's Ultimates, right? Or Manhattan Projects, which was really big, which kind of just fizzles. But to your point, Charlotte, Pax Romana is like, well, I'm going to come back to this, but then it just never happens. So there is some of that too, where you're like, well, I'm leaving the door open to see. All right, let's let's get back into the Ultimate Universe a little bit, in terms of like what this does, what it sets up, what it kind of means for like basically like the Ultimate Universe as a concept. Because like you said, Zach, like you're in the back half, the deep back half of what Ultimate Comics are going to be, of what this universe can be. Hickman, on the way out, he leaves a lot of big ideas behind. You know, he leaves the Maker and the Children of Tomorrow in some capacity. He leaves the people. He leaves in America with a government that has literally been blown up, right? And okay, now we need to fill that void. There's some other like mass casualties in this book, like 300,000 people die in a dirty bomb in, I think, Eastern Europe. And that's like literally stated by Nick Fury is like, yeah, I can't worry about that right now because of the other stuff.
The capital city of Uruguay too gets blown up at some point. Like, yeah, there's a lot of big destruction, and the universe feels completely changed by the end.
Yeah, and it's I think it's one of the effective things about this book where it's like there's so much tension from the Spy Center, you know, Nick Fury viewing everything in terms of like everything's hitting the fan at once. I think that raises the stakes and amplifies sort of the sense of what's going on. But then by the time you get to the end of this, it's like the world is like destroyed. Like Ultimatum left the superhero universe destroyed. Ultimates leaves this whole world, Earth, like as an absolute cluster and a mess. What do you think about the kind of the way it exits, the way it walks out, and just like, I guess, does it have you excited about the Ultimate Comics moving forward, or, you know, concerned?
It was very. I didn't know there were more issues. I didn't know the run kept going after that with another writer. Because by the end, when there's the tease of Captain America going back and stuff like that, it was like, oh, there's a continuation. I thought this was just like, basically like Hoxpox, like having a mini series to introduce a new direction for the world. So yeah, I'm curious about what's going to happen next, but I also don't. I don't see it being as interesting as this was, or it could have been if Hickman had kept going. But I'm certainly interested, because I know also like what comes out of it in later years and even after the end of the Ultimate Universe. Yeah,
I agree. Although it's interesting, we're saying like the world is very changed. I don't really see that. Like I didn't walk away from this being like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? Like, how are they ever going to like deal with this status quo shift? Because the only thing that feels particularly pertinent is that Washington, D.C. has blown up. I don't know if the city is still going to be a big player here, right? The city is here, and they might be a big player, and Washington, D.C. has been blown up. But like,
well, also like
Ultimatum
a lot of
wiped
Europe's
out,
been destroyed by
but Ultimatum like wiped out all of New York City with a flood, and then like by the time you read the next issues, New York City's fine again, and we just have moved on from that, right? Like that's that kind of stuff. It feels like it's so easy to hand wave away and just like move to the back burner. So I'm interested to see like I don't know if this is going to have big ramifications, which is not a requirement of a good comic necessarily. But I didn't walk away from this being like, wow, everything's changed. Like everything's different. I did walk away.
It's not like
saying,
it feels like it should be changed. Like because all that happens, if they don't address how the universe had changed, it feels like a letdown.
Yeah.
Well, here's a way of rephrasing the question then, which is maybe better, which is, does it end effectively? Like clearly it is compressed by the end, right? And there's this transition period, which I mentioned, but does it still end this story, these 12 issues effectively? Charlotte, let's start with you.
Not really, because that's what we said. It's not actually an ending, so it's hard to say if it was a good ending or not. Because it's so open-ended, like there is resolution that comes quick, and that's like it's weird that Tony Stark is at the center of the resolution, where he wasn't, like he's never been the character opposite Reed Richards. He wasn't the main player of the story up until this point, at least not in the way I read the comic. Yes, it feels like the ending, the last 3 issues feel very different from the rest of the work in a way that's it feels weird that that's the ending, and that the focus shifts a bit, and a lot of threads aren't resolved, mainly the zone thread, I think. It's a weird ending in that it's not really an ending.
I don't know if I really agree. I kind of thought this resolved fine. It didn't feel necessarily like Hickman. Like you could kind of feel the
Yeah.
rudder being pulled away from him to a degree, but like I thought it resolved interestingly, right? Like the Tony Stark sabotaging it with a psychic brain tumor child.
A tumor ex machina.
You know what? Like it sold it for me. I could see like that just not working, but
Yeah.
that worked out right for me. And the way that landed, I think it's because it wasn't just that part. It was just a way of sneaking in to have someone talk to the city and basically, ally with the city against Reed Richards. I think that is the part that works because that has strong like thematic resonance and character resonance throughout what we've seen before. And and then it ends with like kind of a big superhero thing of an enormous Iron Man, the 1960s version, fighting a giant man Hulk, which is fun. That shifted back into just having like big comic book fun.
Yeah. I do think that's a thing that honestly we've even overlooked, and I think fans often overlook a lot in Hickman's work, and especially here with Esad Ribic, who I've definitely
we need to talk about him just a little
how
bit.
good Ribic is and just how much he sells the vision of what this world can be. But like one of the things with Hickman's writing, especially in the Marvel universe, is one of the questions that I've heard him ask repeatedly in interviews and stuff is like, is it cool? like that is, which sounds so silly, right? It sounds so like 90s like Rob Liefeld, like, is it cool? But that's really important to him, and it's also really important, I think, to me as a reader when I'm reading Marvel Universe stuff. It's a big part of what I love about so much in his Marvel Universe stuff, in Secret Wars, and definitely here in the Ultimate Universe, like, and certain stuff, like even just subverting expectations. Like there's a moment where the Shield is behind the 8 ball, and the Children of Tomorrow and Reed have had him beat at every turn, and Nick Fury's like, all right, we're dropping into the Hulk. So they drop the Hulk into the city, and he's destroying the Children of Tomorrow until Reed just starts talking to him. And you have this moment in these beautiful panels by Ribic, with colors by Deane White, of the Hulk and the Maker face to face, and Reed just being like, what is it? What's wrong, Bruce? And they just have this conversation, and it subverts your expectations because it's like, hey, have we tried talking to the Hulk before? Have we, and the Maker's playing him, right? But he's correct in saying like, they're playing you, they're manipulating you. Like you're not going to get what you want. They're just using you, to the point that then the Hulk just like is like napping in the corner of the city for like the remainder of those comics. That's really funny and cool and very enjoyable with what we know about these characters and what typically happens with the Hulk. And then stuff like you're saying, Zach, with like when Sam Wilson, the Falcon, comes in and he's like, I can sneak into the city. And you just have these images of this incredible futuristic sci-fi world in a literal city. And you just give Ribic the space to show what could that look like. And it's beautiful, glorious stuff. That's really cool. So I do think that's a piece that like, it feels less intelligent. It feels less haughty than talking about the big ideas and evolution of societies. But it's really important. And this comic does it very, very well.
Yeah. I agree with that. I do. Oh, Esad Ribic. I did want to just talk about like incredible work. The I don't know what he does. The smoothness and the color palette that is at play here is such a mainstay with him. He's got this way of drawing skin and muscles and veins that like I just never see in anything else. I will say he does the big bug-eyed thing here quite a bit.
So much, yeah.
It never works as well here as it does in his when he's working with Jason Aaron and Thor, because he does it there.
God of Thunder, yeah.
Incredible effect. Like there's a few moments there where he does the like, and it's silly, right? Like it's kind of this like silly cartoonish bug eyes. But in there, it's for these moments of like stark terror, like Thor feeling this like intense terror that really sell it, right? It's so outsized and so like kind of uncanny. And it works fine here, but I just want to like this just.
It does make me laugh though in places where it's not supposed to.
There's
Definitely.
one specific panel of Sam Wilson, and it looks like his eyes are closed, and then he has eyes painted over them.
Yeah,
a little bit. It works fine. Like that's not actually a complaint necessarily, but like this did just make me want to go read that Jason Aaron Thor stuff again, because that God Hunter or God Killer, what is it?
God Bomb.
God
Butcher?
Bomb, but before that, it's the God Killer. Yeah,
God Killer,
Or
yeah. That
God Butcher.
Killer.
God Butcher.
God Butcher, thank you. I knew I wasn't right. Yeah, the God Butcher arc, incredible. That's one of my favorite like single arcs in superhero comics. And that art is a big reason why. That art is incredible. So
And Ribbich will team up again with Hickman on Secret Wars, and it's a big part of what makes
cool
2015 Secret Wars. So
I couldn't be
exciting.
more excited about that.
Yeah.
Damn. Can we just skip 1995 through 2000 whenever?
I know. I'm kind of there with you. Okay. I do want to. So I think in general, we're all pretty into the Hickman verse on the Ultimates. I mean, I think the biggest criticism or lament is obviously just it's seeded for a years long run, and it doesn't get that for kind of the reasons we outlined, whether it's and it's probably it's a combination of all these things, right? It's going up against the New 52. It's Hickman gets the chance to do Avengers. It's kind of just I mean, I think part of it too is just like the Ultimate Universe is on its last legs, and even if you took the New 52 out of the equation, how well would this have done? It seems like the kind of series that, like, this was critically acclaimed at the time. It's not like it didn't get press and attention for being good. But you're a decade plus into the Ultimate Universe. And that's kind of been my thing. We talk about all the time on Marvel this year and variant covers or whatever, where it's like, I think the Ultimate Universe has a 10-year shelf life at the most. And it's past that, and you can reboot it, but it's also just like, it's just weirdly named even Ultimate Comics Ultimates. Like, that's confusing, I think. Yeah. And it's like, what?
Well,
what
I mean, a big portion of this run that is somewhat necessary is just tucked into a 4-issue Ultimate Hawkeye mini, which is like, who cares about Ultimate Hawkeye at this point? Right. But it turns out to be one of the better comics in the Ultimate line ever. But unless this actually had me thinking about comics existing in a social media age, because I bet this comic got totally slept on, right? Like Ultimate Hawkeye, I bet no one read this comic, and I bet it did not particularly sell.
Let's just say I didn't see it in the sales charts when I was scanning for Ultimates.
Purely because no one cares about that character in or out of the Ultimate Universe. Sorry, everybody. Just
how dare you?
I know, just a little Hawkeye joke.
This is actually almost exactly when Fraction and AHA start their Hawkeye run. Yeah.
But you could see why this would totally flop just out of like, well, why would I pick that up? Who cares about that? But in an era of social media, stuff like this does get picked up more. Like you get stuff like there's that Sabretooth comic that just came out. And I would think the same thing about that, where I'd be like, yeah, Sabretooth, who cares about a Sabretooth miniseries? Except that I've seen everyone on Twitter be like, wow, this is one of the better X-Men comics that's come out in a year.
Sure.
So I think that just was an interesting reflection of like, I mean, word of mouth still existed, obviously, right? But it did not spread quite as much as.
How did the people know it was Christmas in the year 2011? How would they ever have found out?
Yeah. I mean, even more than having the what if of what if he had been able to continue this run, this makes me think of like, what if he had been able to relaunch the Ultimate Universe with like an actual new universe, like a full new start? That would have been incredible to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I would love. And it's still kind of on the table. Like, that's still one of the number one. Yeah. What could Hickman do next kind of like favorites of mine and plenty of others, which is like, they've been teasing an Ultimate Universe relaunch for some time. I mean, if I'm them, I don't know why you don't wait until 2025 for the 25th anniversary. Aside from the obvious fact that it would do really well, and get sales.
And they can't help, they can't actually do anything that would help them that much at this point.
I mean, yeah, but yes, I think rebooting it, starting fresh. I mean, I love that idea. Zach, you mentioned something that I actually want to go back to there. You said Ultimate Comics Hawkeye being one of the best Ultimate Universe comics. I mean, having read the whole thing from 2009 through 2011, where do these stand for you in comparison to like everything else?
It's pretty up there, right? Like, and it's hard to compare against Spider-Man, because Spider-Man's like the other thing that really jumps out to me, but it's like Spider-Man's so up and down, and we talked about it. It's just consistently good, but I don't think
the length of Spider-Man, obviously,
but like barely any one part of Spider-Man, I would say, is better than this. But as an aggregate, yeah, it's like a very good run overall. Besides that, the only thing that stacks up against this stuff for me is Jason Aaron's Ultimate Comics Captain America miniseries, which I really love.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that comic's great.
Yeah. Charlotte, what do you think? In your Ultimate reading, do you like Ultimates 3 better?
No.
Okay.
It's interesting because I tend to agree with Zack. I think it's in the sandbox of Jason Aaron on Captain America, and some of Bendis at his best on Spider-Man. And it's interesting that in its place in the Ultimate Universe, this is the successor to Miller on Ultimates and on X-Men, because X-Men and Magneto specifically was the center of the Ultimate Universe for so long.
Right.
And this is the successor to that, as this is the new center of the Ultimate Universe. And yeah, I vibe with this way more than I ever did with Miller, because I like Hickman's style way more than I do Miller's, even at his best.
Yeah.
I think I like this better than any Miller Ultimate, which I know the first Ultimate is very highly regarded, and I think it's a good comic, but I liked this better.
Oh, I like that comic quite a bit, the Hitch Miller stuff, but this is like miles better. It's interesting actually, having read all the Ultimate stuff and knowing exactly what Hickman is pulling from, that he is so successful in integrating like Mark Miller's characters, because I was like, he's going to do that Hawkeye character has sucked throughout the Ultimate Universe.
Right.
It is not a cool character, especially lately, and what's he going to do with it? And you know what? Like, he threads the balance of it being like, yeah, that still feels like the same Hawkeye, but, it doesn't have that same like grungy, nasty tone to it. Like, he's still gross, right? Like, he still makes some crass jokes, but like, it doesn't feel quite the same. I don't know. I think he pulls off that balancing act of like sticking to the original comic without.
He softens the juvenilia, I think, effectively with Hawkeye in particular.
Yeah.
He leans more into like, this guy's a soldier. He's been a soldier all his life. He runs Black Ops missions for Nick Fury, and it's not. It doesn't feel like a different person, but it feels like a person that I can read without just cringing the entire time, which is useful. I mean, I think the same is true for like, again, like he clearly has affinity for Ultimates. I mean, I think that's a work that a lot of comics creators in the superhero sphere look at, and they're like, yeah, that's how you do superhero comics, or at least the influence of it. But like, his Tony Stark is the Tony Stark of the Ultimate Universe, no question, right? He's joking and he's messing with wealthy elites while simultaneously being Iron Man. His Thor, obviously, he has a connection to this version of Thor because he makes his origin work in the Ultimate Universe, like he's the one who's like, hey, did we ever explain the whole thing where he's maybe a god, maybe not a god, and he actually goes back and does it, which to me doesn't feel super necessary, but like in the Ultimate Universe, I guess it kind of is. But yeah, like and his Nick Fury is very good too, right? Like he takes and runs with the Nick Fury of the Ultimate Universe, which is, with the exception of Hickman's Secret Warriors, ironically, like the Nick Fury of the Ultimate Universe is the only cool Nick Fury. Actually, that's not true. I like the Bendis Nick Fury. Anyway, what were you gonna say, Zach?
He's also just really funny. It's something. I mean, this is something that's always being said. It's like, oh, I'm surprised that Jonathan Hickman is funny. Like we all forget this regularly. I think,
having read Transhuman, trust me, I forgot this. I forgot this.
I mean, and in not like he just has sometimes very juvenile, but like really well paced jokes. The joke of because Thor is having all of Asgard in his head. Like the joke is, I don't even know if it's a joke, but like Valhalla is in his head now.
Well, Volstagg passing gas at a
right,
table.
exactly.
That's a classic punchline.
It's a great joke because they're all like having this serious speech, and he was just like, "I have grave news, my friend," and then it's a close up cut of Volstagg's face, and he's like, "I have passed gas," and then the entire table starts laughing while Thor, just hangs his head depressed. Great joke. And and like just the lightness of touch to this, the drinking bear, stuff like that. He knows how to. He just knows how to pace out a comic too, and he knows how to make it not too heavy all the time. Like he does something that I talk about all the time, but he writes issues of comics, right? Like this is the issue where we get to see Sam break in to the city. This is the issue where S.H.I.E.L.D. does the assault on the city, and it is all pushing everything forward. But this issue has a descriptor, and it is not just like, oh, well, here's the 7 threads, and they all just inch forward during this issue, and the next issue, they all inch forward a little more. And like, there's a little of that, of course, right? You get little updates from some characters, but most issues have like, this is what's happening in this issue. And I love someone who uses comics in the medium properly. I would say.
Well, and I think that would have been one of the biggest benefits of this going longer is that type of structure. Then as you do more focused individual issues, as you get closer and closer to telling the full story, those things begin to come together more naturally, whereas this, it kind of has to rush it for the last bit. One of the last things I really like about Ultimates too is there's just more Marvel Universe tie-in stuff that the Ultimate Universe hasn't played with than I remembered. You mentioned the Celestials, the Eternals, and the Deviants, and kind of just tossing out those concepts. You get a similar thing with the Runaways. Just like mutants who go and flee to Tion now, they're called Runaways.
Oh yeah, did that bother you, Charlotte? I was wondering. I was like, I bet Charlotte's not gonna like this.
I mean, the use of having them be called the Eternals, the Celestials, and the Runaways, I don't really mind it. I just think if the comic hadn't used those words, nothing would be different. It doesn't do a lot more than just recognize that thing from the main universe. Yeah, we're using that word. It didn't do much.
I think with the Celestials and Eternals,
hate it.
I do think with the Celestials and Eternals and Zorn, that's actually a reimagining of what those words mean. Whereas Runaways is a nod and a wink.
And there's an interesting inversion of the Eternals in that in 616 they're basically supposed to be the origins of the Marvel Universe, whereas here they're the future. They're more, I mean, not exactly transhuman, post-human, like, which is something he'll tackle in his X-Men.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting inversion, and also that like in the comics, the Eternals all have their own personalities, and they all look different, whereas the Celestials all look more the same. And here it's the opposite, where the Celestials seem to all have their own personalities. Although it was unclear to me what the difference between the two brothers exactly was, except that one was more meaner than the other.
Well, one has a sun inside his head, and one has a black hole.
Okay.
And one is peaceful and meditative, and the other is the destroyer of worlds.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
That's mostly it.
Yeah. So I mean, also you can always say, like, if they wanted to do a version of the Runaways, you could just ignore that one line.
Oh yeah,
and just do it anyway. Yeah.
Sure. Right. Sure. Well, you also get West Coast Avengers here with the Wackos.
Wait, do we though? Because they that whole thing kicked off that they were going to go find those, the West Coast Avengers, and then I was like, wait, who are they? Did they prop up again? Like
drop thread by the end of the
it okay? Because I was waiting to see the team, and then I never really felt like we got to see the team, and then I just kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, I don't know if the intent was
we got 12 more
just
issues.
Nick Fury's West Coast, installations, or if there's actually like a secret team in waiting. I don't know what the intent was. Yeah. And then the other thing was La Contessa Valentine, a Hickman favorite from Secret Warriors, gets pulled back. She's in the wealthy elites meeting with Tony Stark.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I've talked a lot as we've talked about this about like wanting people to do different stuff with the playground in the Ultimate Universe, to get imaginative with takes on characters and concepts. But then I've been resistant to some of the ways that got executed. Brian K. Vaughan's Mean Mr. Sinister, where he just looks like a guy who like listens to too much Puddle of Mud and maybe is hallucinating Apocalypse. Like that didn't work for me at all.
Yeah, no.
But I find Hickman's approach straddling that line fairly effective. And I think with certain things like Runaways, you could say like, well, it'd be cool if they actually did a version. But clearly there are no plans for that. So given that, I'm like, sure, whatever, do the nod and the wink. Yeah, but I do just love that it actually like gets a real build on what was there in the Ultimate Universe before, and Hickman does this a lot with Bendis' stuff in particular. Like Bendis, kind of helps him get into Secret Warriors and launches it. But it's like he takes Bendis' work on the Maker or on Reed, and he's like, all right, you walked, I'm going to run. I'm going to take that and make it something that is so cool that it's still used in Marvel Comics right now, in the 616. Yeah. So I think that's some pretty impressive work as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, what other big thoughts did you have? Any other ideas that you want to make sure we touch on?
We touched on the Volstack file joke, so I think that was the most important thing.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm glad we didn't forget that.
Yeah. The other Twitter take that I got yesterday from @ExcelL522 said, people see this as a precursor to his Avengers for obvious reasons, which it is. I mean, that's literally what comes next. There's certain panels and dialogue that are like beat for beat the same in terms of like when Thor gets discovered by Ex Nihilo and the Mars people in Avengers, like they use the same dialogue that the Children of Tomorrow use when they discover Thor. Somebody showed that on Twitter yesterday, which was cool. There's like the zebra people as advanced, evolution. Like there's concepts and things that definitely compare. And then obviously like it all builds to Secret Wars at kind of this end of the story. But Excel says, I think I see it more in comparison with X-Men, which we talked about. A franchise essentially failing and Hickman given carte blanche to make any changes he saw fit. It probably is the most comparable, because even Fantastic Four might have that reputation now, but it certainly wasn't quite in those straits then. I mean, because that's another thing where he's literally following Miller and Hitch on Fantastic Four on a run that no one talks about. So it's kind of just fallen to the wayside because it didn't work, but it's not like he was following, a disaster, quote unquote. Like he was following big name creators on a Fantastic Four run that just didn't really hit. But here with Ultimates, it's definitely like, and the thing I'll say too, giving my favorite thing to do is give credit to Ultimatum, an idea that I loved. You cannot have Ultimate Comics Ultimates without Ultimatum. I think it is Ultimates is the thing that makes Ultimatum maybe worth it. And nobody wants to hear that because Ultimatum's really bad and it's very, very poorly executed. But strategically, you cannot get one without the other. It's a little bit like Killing Joke and Barbara Jordan getting paralyzed by the Joker. Bad thing. You don't get Oracle.
I mean,
you don't get a later better thing.
Killing Joke
without
and
the
Ultimatum, please.
Are those not exactly comparable scenarios I brought up?
No,
clearly. Was that a bad metaphor? Yes.
I know. I know what you meant, though.
Yes,
it's a good comparison.
Okay, so I made a great point, and everyone agrees.
Never mind. I take it back. I did it out.
Zach, any final Ultimates thoughts or Hawkeye thoughts? Things we didn't touch on? Funny little bits?
No. That's it for me. Just very, very enjoyable, exciting for this, and like could not be more excited to get to the Hickman era of Marvel Comics. Like there's nothing that's just like more like my thing exactly than, because I'm having so much fun with reading his independent work. Like even the stuff that is like not top tier Hickman is still like, I'm just, I think he's a fascinating creator. And then hearing that, you think it's totally successful, right? And like most people think it's very successful.
Secret Wars #9 is one of the best stuck landings of all time.
Very excited about that. It's gonna be like 2025 maybe.
Like it's Secret Wars #9 and then Carrie Strug on the broken ankle. Like I think it's 1-2 stuck landings.
That's interesting.
Very, very contemporary reference.
I don't know what
is that, 1996 Olympics, US Olympics history?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, I'll have to look it up too. I might have referenced the same one.
It's just because you got the year maybe wrong. That's why I didn't get it.
Must be that. Okay, so this is good. I would say in terms of like prereqs for reading, I would definitely recommend reading the Ultimate Fallout bits. Again, if you start at issue 3, I think is when Hickman comes on board.
I disagree.
They do just break it up.
I don't think any of that's necessary.
I think it really helps with the Tony and it necessary is a stretch, but like it is context and it is not. It's of a piece and it's the same
Tony
style.
Stuff kind of. The Maker stuff I actually think works better without, because then you actually get the reveal here.
Because you don't know it, maybe.
And I think the reveal is fun. The Tony stuff like is summed up in a sentence, which is like he's involved with a club of high financiers who are doing some dastardly stuff.
I was so confused by the idea of wealthy elites doing dastardly stuff. I did not see that.
Especially in a Jonathan Hickman book.
Yeah. Well, and like that's the thing too, where it's like I would have liked to have seen him what he thought he was going to do with that concept here, because that's obviously something that he plays with a ton, most notably in like Black Monday Murders, which is one of my favorite Hickman books. That obviously we'll get to. Yeah. So next time on HickMania, we're going to hop out of the Marvel Universe. We're going to hop back to creator owned. We're going to talk about A Red Mass from Mars, which is Hickman doing creator owned superheroes, which I actually think will be really interesting in contrast to this. It is of a piece with the likes of like Injustice or Irredeemable, but definitely done in a pretty different way.
Oh, that's weird, because I think next time on my Ultimate Year, we're going to be talking about more Miles Morales Spider-Man comics, a 13-issue Ultimate X-Men Nick Spencer run.
Yeah.
And Spider-Men 1 through 5, which I don't really know what that means. What that is, but
Ooh, well, I'm excited for you to find out what that means, because that's a favorite of the year.
yeah,
I like that
cool.
one.
Do you know who wrote that?
Spider-Man's Bendis.
Bendis again. Okay.
And I feel like I should know the artist off the top of my head, but now I can't think of who it is. Blanking. Okay, but no, that one's good. I like that stuff. So all right, so all you have to do to keep hearing all this HickMania, you can like and subscribe the Comic Book Herald podcast. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. They will be available via podcast and YouTube. For My Ultimate Year, which I begrudgingly do recommend, podcast that was on.
The more money My Ultimate Year makes, it goes straight into your pocket, despite not being on the show. So,
what are you talking about?
You get.
How am I making money off of My Ultimate Year? Please send me that report.
It gets us Patreon backers. You get some of that money. Yeah,
sure. That's a thing that could happen. You can like and subscribe to My Ultimate Year, the podcast. Please do that. Keep hearing Zack and Charlotte break down the entirety of the Ultimate Universe. And then we've got a spreadsheet for all the comics. You can find the Ultimate Universe reading order on comicbookherald.com. That's in a sense what they're working off. But if you want to do the thing we didn't say up front, but it's like the Ultimate Universe is such a fun way to explore Marvel Comics, because you can read the whole thing from 2000 to 2015, and it is contained in a way that obviously 616 is not. So, and that's why you're actually coming to a conclusion, whereas we just started the Marvel Comics in 1995 in My Marvelous Year.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. Any final thoughts? Anything else? Charlotte, where should people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Fierro Charlotte, and you can find me on the Slack.
Zack, where should people find you?
Over on My Marvelous Year on Twitter and in the Slack again. Yeah.
Okay. I'm at Comic Book Herald, everywhere online, and comicbookherald.com. Charlotte, final question. You mentioned Krakoa parallels between what Hickman's doing here in Ultimates. What did you want to say there? What were you thinking about in terms of the X-Men Krakoa parallels?
Oh yeah, it was interesting because the way I think it's Tian, the heaven cities of Xon and Zone. Those feel very similar to what Hickman will do with Krakoa and his X-Men, and there's specific pages of Xon basically addressing the world via his oracle. That's almost page per page the same thing as in Professor X announcing to the world the nation of Krakoa, which is interesting that in X-Men it's specifically for mutants. And here, Xon and Zone basically say that heaven will be a safe haven for anyone that needs it, like whether it be mutants. Here we see 3 mutants that were being basically used by Nick Fury join heaven. And it's interesting that this is a more, not vague, but more large version of what Krakoa is. And it's closer to what Krakoa represents for non-specifically fantasy superhero, what it means for actual discriminated against people. And yeah, there's a potential for the Ultimate Universe, heaven being a safe place for anyone that needs it, and not just mutants and not just superhero people.
Yeah. No, it's a cool idea. I definitely see the parallels. There's a lot of language parallels too. I'll end on this one. Hickman repeatedly uses the language, "This is the world we've made" here in Ultimates. And that is something he returns to a lot, particularly in East of West. This quote I like: "This is the world. It's not the one we were supposed to have, but it's the one we made. We did this. We did it with open eyes and willing hands. We broke it, and there's no putting it back together." Been feeling that one these days. And it's definitely a theme that runs here through Ultimates. So, all right, this is good. Thanks everybody for listening. Again, links to all the comics, what's coming next in the show notes. HickMania on YouTube and Comic Book Herald. My Ultimate Year also on Comic Book Herald. Great show. I love it. I'm teasing.
No, that's right. We don't have an ending for the show.
You're doing a great job. And we don't have an ending, so I'm vamping. Enjoy the comics.
Enjoy the Ultimates.
Enjoy the Hickmans.
Enjoy the Hickmans.
Maybe.